I am a retail manager for Techtronic Industries. So my first is Sacramento territory as well as the territory.
My name is Jensen Reddy. I'm a territory manager for Techtronic Industries, and I oversee the North Bay area.
Sure.
So made a little trek on I-80, but we're here now.
Yeah, apologize. We got started in like just snow traffic, but we're here now. We're kind of here to just talk to you guys about resume work, building, what we look for when we're looking at resumes, how to kind of make your resumes look a little bit better, more professional, kind of get the point across what you're trying to say, and making sure that it's going to be really effective when you're either interviewing or submitting applications, or just kind of going for those positions in the future. So,
Thank you for making the trek.
social media content. Of course. So just to kind of begin, what types of things do you guys know off the bat that you're like when you're submitting your resume? What are some things that you guys are really trying to put into your resumes to like make it stand out? Do you want to try to look at this? So before
experiences.
It's like one of those problems. But like maybe
Needed written visual to ensure to intent. Further engage. So kind of just to give a brief like rundown of kind of like our presentation we're going to say is so a little bit about us. Yeah. We'll kind of go through what is a resume, what kind of like things do we look for, as well as some do's and don'ts on resumes. We have a couple of example resumes on our presentation that we'll kind of debrief and look through together. And then if you guys will kind of do a little bit more about TBI and us, and then if you guys want help like looking through your guys' resumes, or if you want any suggestions or any help, we can do that and start with that. No problem. So this is my contact information. I'm the UNR campus lead. So if you guys want to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me your resume via email, or just want to be in touch, feel free to do so. I also have an you guys as well.
So overall, I mean, I'm sure we all have a good understanding of what a resume is, but just to kind of get it down to basics, the definition that we included is that a resume is essentially a brief account of a person's education, qualifications, and previous experience, typically sent with a job application. But at the end of the day, a resume is going to be a curated form of a description about yourself and what you want to communicate to your employer or your future employer about your experiences, your accolades, your skills that are applicable to the specific position that you're applying for. So overall, it's just sending a message to the employer about what you're about in terms of your passions and what you would provide for them when you would work with them.
You kind of want to think about it as like a brag sheet. So you really want to highlight these things that are really important things to you, as well as the most important things that for the position that you're applying for. So if you are applying for a sales position, a management position, marketing, whatever it is that you may be, you want to kind of tailor your resume to emphasize the top position you're going for. So for us, when we look at resumes, we're giving it like a quick glance, essentially, to be very honest with you guys, because we get a decent amount. So you want to make sure that on that first glance, like when you're looking at it, this is like this is what you want to portray, this is what's important, and this is what you're trying to get at. This is going to be the main things. So essentially similar to what Jensen had mentioned, these are kind of the things that you're looking for, like if this is important to include on a resume. Is this something that is relevant? Like I mentioned, if you're applying for a sales position, you want to go ahead and highlight experiences or make them look in a way that's going to highlight towards that position. So let's just say you play a sport, and you're wanting a management role. You even know, yes, you're thinking to yourself, hey, like how does this sport have anything to do with being a manager? You're able to kind of use that experiences and kind of tailor your resume to look like, hey, I was mentoring, I was leading, I was assisting, I was training. Then you can kind of make whatever it is that you're doing kind of tailor towards the position that you're going for. So you want to highlight a lot of special things. So if you are the president of an organization, or you have any part in planning some type of organization or an event, you want to make sure that we're displaying those things to showcase you in the best spotlight that you're able to do to help you kind of show like, hey, this person is qualified, this person is experienced, this person overall is going to be an overall good fit for our organization.
Yeah, and something that is really important to know as well, and I like to highlight is when we're talking about outlining relevant skills, and like Tatiana mentioned, tailoring stuff, there is something in every position you have that can be tailored toward a future position. There's a lot of hats you wear in every job, whether that's working at a restaurant or working in a retail environment. There's something you can take away from everything to tailor to a future employer that would be an applicable experience in the future.
And
So I
just,
think that's important.
just to kind of add on to that, like I think the main thing is when you're going through your resume, something that we do is, don't rush it. Take some time to look through your experiences, like just something you mentioned. There's something in every single role that you're doing, whether or, just if you're having a group project and you're leading that group project, there's something out of like, I would say 99% of things that you can pull out of each experience to highlight on your resume to kind of make it look like it's for the relevant job or internship or whatever it is that you're applying for. You're definitely able to pull some piece of valuable information out to really stand out on that resume.
Go to the next slide. Oh, yeah, of course.
By investment in personal brand, just kind of like.
Yeah, so for, I think each person, like, there's certain things that maybe you like to do versus what he likes to do that are gonna be like, totally different. But you're both applying for the same position. What's gonna make you you versus you? And that's kind of your personal brand. So for me, I was a student athlete in college. So for me, if you look at my resume, a lot of my experience is gonna be a lot of sports related things, a lot of teamwork related things. I know Jensen was more involved in like clubs per se. So a lot of his personal branding is going to be towards the clubs that he was doing. That kind of answer your question.
Yeah, and to make a comment on that, just to give a more practical example of what mine looked like in comparison to an athletic perspective, I was doing a lot of like logistics and operations stuff for the clubs I was involved. So in charge of like all outreach to the hundreds of members of the people in the clubs that I managed on campus at UC Davis. And so I like to apply that to the positions I was applying for, which were initially sales and now management. And so just kind of tailoring that personal branding another way into my resume to communicate to the employer, hey, these are the skills I bring to the table.
I'm not sure if you attend the networking session, but just to kind of a pre-glimpse of that kind of essentially, that is kind of when you're networking, every single time you talk to someone or you're like just having your elevator pitch, you're kind of selling yourself. It is your personal brand. It's what you want to give off to whoever it is that you're talking to. And so the initial part about that, like, let's just say we connect on LinkedIn, you send me a message, you send me your resume. Based on first glance that I look at your resume, that's going to be maybe the personal brand that I'm looking for prior to when I'm meeting you. So it's kind of like building off of the resume. It's what do you want to show me before I meet you? That makes sense.
You said you're doing the networking one this afternoon. Okay. Another networking one tomorrow. I don't know if you guys go. Okay, I won't be there today. I'm fine.
Feel free to reach out to us. We'll be here for a couple hours if you want to drop down information or if you want to help on a call or or just talk to us after. You're more than welcome to.
Of course. So a little bit about what's good to include on a resume, what's not good in terms of like the nitty gritty. It's really important that you have your contact information really clear in terms of like your email and your phone number. There are multiple ways that I schedule my interviews based on resumes. Depending on my availability, that might be via a phone call, via text, via email. So it's crucial to have that information. I know it seems obvious, but just having all the avenues that I can contact you available makes it easier to contact the interviewee. Including all the relevant professional experience. Like I said, you can pretty much take something away from every position, but just making sure that you are curating your resume specifically for the job you're applying for is important. Anything that involves leadership experience is always great. Organizations are always needing leaders, whether that's in a sales position, a management position, really through anything, leadership experience is always super applicable. And then as far as formatting goes, just making sure that you are not writing entire paragraphs per your job description, but including more like bullet point format, and then trying to keep your resume to one page makes it really readable for us. Like Tatiana mentioned up front, we are honestly going through potentially hundreds of resumes through a week. And so we don't have a ton of time to glance over and look at every specific detail. So making sure you keep it to one page. So that it is accessible for us is important, because sometimes I'll be honest, I receive resumes that have been like 4 or 5 pages, and I won't bother to look through them because I just don't have the time to go through them. And I know that seems unfair, but it's kind of just how it is when you're going through 100 resumes at a time. So I would keep it to 1 page.
I would say, like, just to highlight and kind of add on to that with the 1 page, it is going to be the formatting. What we mean by that is that it's looking very clear, concise, to the point, and you're really in bold highlighting, like Jensen mentioned, putting it at the top. Hey, that contact and communication, the education piece of it, anything that's like, is going to stand out. If you have like a 4.0 GPA, put that right at the top. If you speak another language, whatever it is, like, just kind of make sure we're highlighting, because like Jensen mentioned, we're taking a glance at it. I can tell you, like, I know it seems unfair, but sometimes if we have a resume that just kind of looks all over the place, we're spending like maybe a minute max looking at it, and it's on to the next one. So you want to make sure that you are really taking your resume and making it very clear, concise, and very easy to read.
Yeah, and I think that sort of summarizes a lot of the bullet points included there, but something I wanted to mention as well that kind of falls under photographs is a fancy resume is always fantastic, but at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is your experience, your applicable experience, your education, and any other skills or useful pieces of information about yourself. So for me personally, and I think for a lot of the employers that I know, we're not looking for the best like graphically designed resume, but something that is very concise and can communicate what you're capable of as a person.
Unless you're maybe applying for like a graphic designer.
Yes.
Then maybe that's probably better.
That would probably be a good idea in that case. Yeah.
As a transfer student, now that I'm graduating in spring, and I know like my resumes have pretty much the same structures in high school for just those types of jobs. Now that I'm like big girl jobs and stuff, like want to revamp it. But I currently have like under education, like since I'm a transfer student, like my community college, and high school, and I'm like I went to 2 high schools. So like, I mean, I think the high school stuff I could probably mix that, I'm guessing. But do you think it would be beneficial to do like maybe like my community college? Do you think maybe not, like that's something where it's like if I don't have room, it's like not the biggest deal?
As a transfer student myself, so I lived in the East Bay and then transferred to UC Davis. I have kept it on my resume. I'm at the point now where my experience, I did keep it on my resume initially after post-graduation. I'm at the point now where my applicable experience is getting a little long. And so I don't think it's necessary anymore. But there was a lot of classes from my community college that I thought were very applicable to some positions. And so I think if that's the case for you, it'd be worth including, as well as relevant coursework, if that's something that you would like to shout out.
What do you mean by fabricated?
Just not putting anything that's not true, essentially. I know that's a pretty big gimme, but yeah, it does happen from time to time. And so just making sure you're being truthful by your experience, because if you're not, it'll definitely end up catching up to you.
I'm curious. Mind giving me an example? Not that I'm gonna try to, but I'm just curious, like what that kind of what stands out to you as fact, just so that like as I'm trying to like truthful, like
Yes,
I don't just make it sound.
So I think the most common way that occurs is people pretty much never fabricate a position, but they will fabricate maybe some key performance indicators on their resume that might be exaggerated compared to what they were before. When it comes to the resume, and like we said, we're spending a minute looking at it, but then once we get into that interview process, I spend a significant amount more time prior to the interview actually deep diving the resume. And I like to ask high level questions about some of those key performance indicators and what they say about you and how that worked at your job. And so that would be an example of something that I've seen fabricated in the past, but not necessarily, it's just something that I wouldn't do, because some people can't speak on their success at companies, even though they have it written down. And so if you are,
say you know how to work Excel, and then you're applying for like an operations job where they're requiring, if you're like, hey, like advanced in Excel, and like you're applying and we go, hey, like, why don't you like put all these data things in, yada, yada, and then you're like, oh crap, like, this is not what I meant. That's kind of what we mean by fabricated. Or like, you're like, I sold like this, and you just like begin to an interview and I'm like, hey, tell me a little bit more about that. And you can't tell me about that because it doesn't exactly, it's not truthful. That's kind of what we mean by that.
Yeah. Good question.
So pretty much kind of just to summarize, this slide looks pretty self-explanatory, but kind of the things that we are looking for is just kind of the word choice and the verbiage that you're doing. In addition to it, you want to keep it very consistent. So like you can kind of see like when it says like use versus utilizes, talked, communicated, you'll kind of notice that the suffix on everything is the same. The only time, and I think it kind of varies, but for me, like, unless it's like your present job. So like for me, what I would put right now as regional manager, I would say like manage versus managed, if that makes sense. So your verbiage on all of your bullet points is going to be very critical. Like we mentioned a couple slides back, you are going for bullet point style. You're not going full essays. You're not going paragraphs. It's pretty short and sweet to the point. So you want to make sure that the verbiage, every word on your resume, you want to make it very intentional. Because if it's not, it is going to sound kind of like Jensen mentioned earlier, a little bit fabricated. It's going to look like a bunch of mumbo jumbo. You just want to keep it very consistent, use impactful words, and just kind of highlight them and make them relevant to what you're doing. So if you're applying for like an operations position, using words like analyze, establish, things like that. If you're going for like sales management, you want to go like, you know, networked, maintained. You just want to make sure you're being extremely intentional in your verbiage when you're going through all of the resume stuff.
Yeah, and I would add, prior to my experience going through a ton of resumes, I would have looked at this slide and I probably would have thought it wasn't a huge deal, but you do have one page to convey to a future employer, you know, who you are, what you're about, and how much care you're putting into this resume and how much care you put into a job. And so when I do go through some resumes and I see some repetition potentially, or, you know, maybe not curating the best verbiage to describe what they're doing, it does leave at least a little bit of an impression. So I do think it's important to kind of take care in the language that you're using on your resume.
I also have to remember that like certain jobs, like we mentioned, when we're looking, we get like hundreds of resumes a day. So we're kind of taking the time to be like, if there's like a grammatical error or like a missed typo, we're like, okay, like kind of move on that. That's kind of what I mean is like be very intentional, make sure you're looking at it, you're really thinking about the word choices that you're putting on these resumes and making sure A, it makes sense, and B, it is like just like grammatically correct. So now what we're gonna do is we have a couple sample resumes. We're just gonna look at them. If you guys can either raise your hand or go ahead and just shout out some things that you think are done really well on this resume, as well as some areas of opportunity. And then we can kind of, it's an area of opportunity, kind of maybe just share what you think, how you would fix it based on like everything we've kind of said, or what maybe previous knowledge you've already had. And we'll just kind of go through it together.
What do you guys think? Any strengths, any opportunities?
Well, I know like they included a photo and like kind of like the background is like and like the splash of paint is really needed. And then I have class I have to leave, but thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that last one, because even for a graphic design job, I probably wouldn't want to advertise this one. Yeah, it's very distracting.
I like that certain key information is spread apart, like at least on my resume, I kind of have like thunder mufflin, paper clinking, whatever, like that's in bold and stuff, and then I have the location, but then having the date kind of off to the side, I feel like that's helpful to just see that not all just kind of clumped together in one little section.
Yeah. I think that section, that particular section of the formatting does look concise and communicates clearly, you know, where he was, what position he had, and the date range. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So here's some of the stuff that we put down. You know, like we said, it's nice to be able to clearly, this is his phone number, this is where I can get him via email, and those are going to be the main two ways you communicate with someone you want to schedule an interview with. Kept it to one page. He described his experience via bullet points. He was consistent with the formatting that was actually pretty good, like he said. He kept it consistent. But the one thing that was mentioned, you know, is distracting format. Why would you put your resume in camouflage? Are you basically just asking them not to look at it? And then I know we didn't really deep dive the specifics of his bullet points, but there's not really quantifiable results. So that's kind of what I was talking about in terms of key performance indicators. You know, boosted sales by 20% in the time that I was at this job, stuff like that. Being able to actually lock down some real things. And then in this resume as well, it was unprofessional and had fabricated experience.
So just kind of touch on that, like this piece, as far as formatting, this looks really good to us. So like, let's just say like, if I was to fix it, take out all of the colorful stuff, maybe like undo these bold lines. And even if they're bold formatting, but if it's just consistently white throughout the page, how it is in this particular format, that would be an okay formatting.
All right, this is one more resume. Give you guys a second to look at it and let me know what you think.
Maybe not having education at the top. It's relevant, but like, I mean, I guess if they just graduated, I suppose, but in the sense that it's like, you want, like you said, those quantifiables kind of first and extra there.
I think I would agree with you on the point of if you have just graduated, it might be the most relevant
Yeah.
experience. But yeah, if you've been in the workforce for a while, it might not be the best.
Was told that normally you would like to put your name about more resume.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think that's an opportunity for this one too. It is pretty small.
What about having a LinkedIn placing? I've never seen that. Actually, it sounds smart to me, but I don't know if that's too much information.
I think it's not harmful to over communicate that. I have mine on mine.
Yeah, I have mine in mind. So it's not the worst thing, especially now kind of like moving just with the technology times, like a lot of people are going to look at you on LinkedIn. That's another thing that kind of with your personal branding, your LinkedIn is going to say a lot about your personal branding. And I don't mean that in like, don't try and be a LinkedIn influencer. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like, present yourself in the best way possible on LinkedIn. Remember that employers are generally looking at that before they're even having an interview with you.
So some of the things on this one, personally, overall, this format is a lot nicer for me because I can clearly call out, I can see what their education is and how applicable it is to the jobs that I'm hiring for. And then immediately from there, I can see their relevant work experience.
It's similar to what mine looks like formatting wise. Just want to make sure you're keeping it consistent, to the point. It's very easy to read. Like you mentioned, I probably would make your name at the top a little bit bigger, a little bit bolder. But overall, the formatting of it is like really good.
Yeah. And then just the one opportunity in the formatting would be just making sure, I think that consistency, making sure the dates stay consistent. And then adding where you're working as well could be important. I'm hiring for a job in Napa, California right now. And so I want to know that that person can feasibly commute to that on-site position.
I don't know, mostly the concludes our like resume portion, but is there anything kind of on your guys' resume specifically that maybe you're a little bit unclear of how to word things or how like you want to format things to say things about you and your experiences that you kind of would want us or our help with?
What would y'all say is like main topics you should like education, reading,
Yeah. So there's two more sections that you could theoretically add, and it does depend on your experience. So for mine, right at this point, I have my education and my professional experience because I can fill out my entire page with that. And usually there's relevant information for any job that I would theoretically want to apply for. When I first graduated, I had two different sections. I had a personal summary and then I had a skill summary as well. If you don't think you have the professional experience to justify a whole page, it could be useful talking about relevant coursework that you've taken here that would apply to the job that you're going for. And then in addition to that, same thing with skills. Like you mentioned, you know, if you happen to be great with Excel or any of the Microsoft Office suite, or, you know, if the, the company you're going for uses Salesforce or Slack or some other software, you could mention that as well.
I would say like for me, when I'm like when I first got like similar to him, now I have enough work experience that like that's the majority of my page. But when I first graduated, I had my education at the top. I
I think one like professional experience, and then I had leadership experience. And so that was for me, like the clubs I was involved in, the clubs I was leading, the sports I was playing, like the positions like captain, things like that, that I would include in there. And then just like some skills at the bottom. I'm bilingual, so I included that on mine just because it's pretty important. If you do have that skill. But like you mentioned, it's resumes is really like what you want it to say about you. So you can format it to, it should be your brag sheet. It should be like, these are the best things that I want my future employers to know before. So you just kind of want to highlight the main things and most important pieces to you. So that is leadership experience versus work experience. As like someone that now is hiring, that's okay. I'm not going to be upset, or I'm not going to like hold anyone against it if I don't see maybe necessarily like work experience. I mean, obviously if you have it, put it on there, but if you don't, it's okay.
So I like the idea of having like, as one of the first things, like having like the, I don't remember how it was formatted, but just like, instead of just having education, employment history, experience, or whatever, like having kind of like below your name and contact information, just having like irrelevant experiences or whatever, and then you can kind of get more nitty gritty. Would you say that like if I have, let's say in there I have a key experience from school, and then I have one from a job I did, or one from volunteer experience or something, do you think it's worth the space to re-elaborate in that down below, in the sense that it's like the top section is highlighting what already exists down below, or because I use space up there, it's not necessarily like necessary to also include it? Does that make sense? I just want to make sure like it reads well, but like if I put in the top area that I said I have this experience, this is relevant at this job, I don't necessarily need to reiterate it, but maybe it is good to have it just because that's the main area where it'd be organized. I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I have added something to my own resume recently in a personal statement because I felt the same way. And that's sort of, it's a 3-sentence summary of a very concise version of who I am and two sentences following with like 2 key experiences that I've had. And an alternative as well is always submitting a cover letter. A cover letter is a great place to kind of shout out those very specific experiences in a more conversational way that you can, kind of type out in paragraph form. But a personal statement might be worth looking into. Like I said, I'm reading 100 resumes a day. And so unless I really, really am on the fence about pushing a candidate through to an interview, I probably won't write a personal statement. So not to discourage.
Yeah, I don't have it on mine. I think if I'm kind of getting a question, like if it's like worth double mentioning, I think it depends on the position you're applying for. So like for us, when we were applying to be managers, like I put on there like the work I was doing that was like very applicable for my current role to being a manager, whether that was like, hey, mentoring, training, leading. But then let's just say like kind of fast forward down on my resume, I had like being a student athlete on there, which included like training my teammates, working with them, like mentoring them, and like kind of help coach them. So like similar things, different experiences. The reason I put them on both on there in similar kind of ways, even though they are 2 different experiences, is because I wanted to kind of convey like I have a lot of experience in this type of management situation.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's more like not so much like I want to double emphasize. That's why I want to include it twice. But it's more that it's like, let's say we throw out the whole key qualifications at the top, and I just have my resume as education, experience, whatever order. And obviously in those categories, you'll see all the things that are responsible. And if I want to like highlight, then I could, have my qualification section, but like I would still include it down there just because that's part of what I did at that job. I just also want to have it. You know what I mean? It's not so much that I'm trying to double emphasize, it's just an organizational thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I might be reading into it.
I think it's a good question.
I should do one more question. I've heard some people say it's not that relevant anymore to have like an objective at the top. Would you say that? Okay, yeah. Yeah, I've heard that. I can take that out.
I think there's this year.
The last one.
The last piece is kind of just a little bit about us. What majors are you guys, or what year are you guys? Why?
I'm a senior.
And what major are you guys?
I'm human development, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, going in.
Okay. We're specifically hiring for management, marketing, sales, operations. It's not super applicable, so I mean, we could get into telling you guys about us, but
I think we're way over time, right?
yeah, so.
Overtime, but,
Well, we could just leave it with the contact information. If you want to know more about the opportunities we're offering, not to throw you under the bus. but-
More than welcome to take a photo of it, ask for their business cards.
Yeah, if you guys, honestly, if you want me to look at your resume or if you want to schedule a call with us, feel free to do that. You can shoot me a message on LinkedIn or an email, it doesn't matter, like, hey, can we find some time to like go through my resume? I'm more than happy to do that. With you guys on Teams or Zoom, whatever, or a phone call, whatever. And yeah, if you guys know anyone, if you guys have any friends that are interested or, kind of don't have a direction of which way to go right now and they're going to graduate or be want to be juniors or seniors soon next year, feel free to send them our way. We're consistently hiring all the time. So yeah, feel free to get in contact.
What marketing do you do in particular? I do have a friend that's double majoring in management.
So we don't do marketing. Can you actually go to the?
Is it this one?
Yeah. So for us, everyone starts in our first position and you're kind of able to choose. So this is our leadership development program. So you're able to kind of choose which segment you want to promote into. So for Jensen and I, we promoted into the management vertical. So we don't do marketing specifically. However, we do have people on our teams who we are trying to promote into marketing channels. So whether that is in Anderson, South Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, or Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where our headquarters are, they do brand channel product marketing. So they kind of do an overall basis. He and I specifically are in the management channel, but we do have people that go there just based on, but everyone does start in the first role and then that would be something you're promoting into.
As far as types of marketing, there's pretty much everything under the sun. Everyone that starts in this position and goes to marketing takes care of the entire marketing for all of our brands. So anything you can imagine.
Do you focus on a certain sector in business or like in?
Yeah, so our industry is power tools. So we're a power tool conglomerate. So we're specifically targeting homeowners, DIYers, but then we also have, professional contractors in the commercial, industrial, and residential construction spaces. And yeah, these are some of the brands that we license or we own. So yeah, those are the main industries we're targeting. So as far as the industry that we're marketing for, it would be these. And then there's also opportunities in like floor care as well. So like Hoover and Dirt Devil, it's like vacuums, stuff like that.
But yeah, it's definitely, so I had a roommate who interned for TTI, I worked for TTI, we started at the same position, same level, it's just that her interest is different than mine. So she wanted to go to marketing. So now she promoted into product marketing for masonry and concrete bits for Milwaukee Tools. So she now lives in Wisconsin. So she just kind of, when she's marketing coordinator, I'm in this vertical, but also at the same time, like with us, the cool thing about us is like, it doesn't matter which vertical you go into or start to. So for me, I'm thinking like next is going to be going like sales, but like, it's really up to you. You're not kind of stuck in one thing.
I'm sorry to ask. But what do you mean by you're the UNR campus lead? Is it kind of like in your management role, you also are involved in the HR process of things, and so like therefore that's just a big part of your job.
Yeah, as territory managers, we wear a lot of hats. So I have a team of 11 right now, and I have half Sacramento, half Reno. So with our roles, we are responsible for running our teams, growing our business, as well as recruiting. So for recruiting purposes, we each get assigned a campus based on like kind of where our territories are, but also kind of like he and I both went to Davis. So technically I'm only the lead for UNR, but we're co-leads for Davis. But it's just kind of, so like for main points of contact for UNR, it'll be kind of me communicating with Peter or like just anyone else at UNR, like to get presentations or interview setups. It'll come through me because I'm the only one. I just bring Jensen because like we're co-leads for Davis, so it's pretty easy for us to work together. And our territories are really like close together, but that's kind of what I mean by lead. So our job is interesting because we wear a lot of different hats. Any other questions or?
Thanks for coming and spending time with us.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, we're late.
All right, so sorry.
How long of a drive?
It was like 3 hours.
It's only supposed to be 2, but since 80 was clogged up, it ended up being closer to 3. Supposed to get here like
Are you
30 minutes prior to
Are
this.
your offices in Sacramento?
So it's interesting, we don't have offices kind of, so because we're like a national, well, we're a global company, but like. We're also like a national company, so every area in the United States is broken up into a different division. So on a larger scale, it's like the northern, the southern, and the western. If you kind of keep getting smaller, then it gets into subdivisions, and so we're both considered the Pacific North Division. And then within like the Pacific North, if you keep getting smaller, then it's like the territories, so that's the territories like we would manage. And then if you keep going like smaller, it's like our reps who have their stores and their businesses, and that's like what they're in charge. They're just in charge of being in their store and working their store. We're in charge of all the people. And then we have a boss who's in charge of us. And then we have his boss who's in charge of all of them. It just kind of keeps getting smaller and smaller, but. So we don't really have an office. So like half my team is in Sacramento, half my team is in Reno. So I go visit, I work with them, I coach them, I develop them. I'm trying to get them to whatever it is that they want to go to next. But when I'm doing like my recruiting, my HR, and my stuff that I have to do on a computer, I just do it at home or in my truck, but.
You guys commuted from Davis?
I did.
I live in
She lives
Sacramento.
Sacramento. Sweet. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you guys.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, you can find me on LinkedIn via my name or contact her. If you think of anything else.
Do you mind giving me your email address?
Mine is just going to be JENSEN. Dot ready, like the word READY at TTI Group NA.com. Of course. All right, cool. Well, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and we'll see you back in a couple hours.
See you in a
For the networking session.
Right.